This is the brand new NZXT H7 Flow RGB, and this replaces the case that NZXT showed us in 2022, which is also called the H7. Now, first impressions with this case were had at Computex this year, and my first reaction was, this doesn't look like the H7 at all. And that's because it's not. Let's take a closer look.
This video is brought to you by VIPSCDkey.com. Have you ever installed Windows 11 only to see the watermark of death? You don't need to fork out a couple of $100s for a key. You can grab one from today's video sponsor, from VIPSCDkey.com for a tenth of the price. You can use our code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. How good is that? That takes that already cheap Windows 11 key and makes it even cheaper. It's easy as placing your order. Bingo bango. You've got your new key on your orders page. You chuck that key into the activation screen and you're good to go. No more watermark of death. Use code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. Link in the description. On with the video. Back to you, Nick.
To get inside the H7 Flow, there's a little tab on the side panel here. Basically what we want to do is pop that towards you and lift this panel away from the case. That's right, I said it. As you can see here, there's a little notch in the back of the case. You put your thumb in there, and then you can push that panel up and then lift it away. Next up, to remove the back panel, there's a little notch on the back of the case at the top, and you put your fingers in there and then you pull this panel away and lift it. Lastly, we'll want to remove the front panel. Basically, you can put your thumb against the edge of the front panel and push forward, and the whole front panel should pop away from the case. For power supply support, the H7 supports power supplies up to 200 millimeters long. What's different about this version of the case is it's kind of like a dual chamber case because the power supply is mounted on the back side, but also it's kind of the same as having a PSU shroud at the bottom of the case, if that makes sense. Basically, they've just rotated the entire power supply enclosure. There's this removable rear bracket on the back side of the motherboard tray, which will allow you to install either a 2.5-inch drive or a 3.5-inch spinning rush drive, and there's two mounts for those. And as mentioned, this whole bracket is removable. There's a captive screw. They could have put a captive thumb screw, not sure why they didn't do that, but yes, the bracket is completely removable. There's also a removable bracket at the bottom of the case, which will allow you to install two more 2.5-inch SSDs. So it's a tiny little cage. Usually they'll allow you to do a 3.5-inch drive and something like this, but this is tiny. Look at it, it's a little baby. Because this is the H7 Flow RGB version of the case, it has a brand new included NZXT F360 RGB core fan frame. So essentially what this is three 120mm fans in a single mount, and you only have to screw in 4 screws to hold the whole frame in. For powering the fan, you've got a 3-pin fan connector. Not sure why this isn't 4-pin PWM, but I guess they want to save money somewhere. And they have a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB connector to plug into your motherboard or a controller, or you can use that traditional NZXT 4-pin RGB connector as well. Back to the front of the case for fan and radiator support, you can do up to a 420mm liquid cooler or radiator up there, and this whole bracket at the front is removable, which is a nice touch. I love when they make fan brackets removable, it just makes it so much easier to build with, and it's good that they did this with the H7. And I've got to be honest with you guys, I did see this at Computex. I have had a closer look at this already. I'm not sure why they called this the H7, because this is not an H7. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all, because this should be called something else. This is a completely new case. On the bottom of the H7, you've got 3 120mm fan mounts, and this is a sunken fan mount, if that makes sense. Let me show you what I mean. Basically, when you put fans in here, they sit flush with the bottom of the case, and this is going to be a trend that we're going to see probably over the next 12 months become really prevalent, because we've seen companies like Montech already start to do this as well. I think Montech was doing it first, and now NZXT has kind of got that flush mounting for fans. It's something I like. So yeah, 3 120mm fans. I'm rambling a bit here today, guys. Up top, you can do 3 120mm fans or a 360mm radiator or liquid cooler, or 2 140mm fans or a 280mm liquid cooler. This also includes 2 40mm radiators as well. Finally, at the back, you can do up to a 140mm fan, and you've got 120mm fan mounting back there as well. Cable management is classic NZXT. We've got this Velcro tie-down raceway to the left of the back of the motherboard tray for all of the front panel cables. We've also got this other raceway here that is kind of on the edge of where your motherboard would be. And then you've got another one along the top for your EPS power cable. So you can run everything from the basement up and around it that way. It's a pretty clean solution. We've also got that cable management bar, which is classic NZXT. This is removable with a couple of screws. You need to remove this if you're going to be using a bigger motherboard. Basically what you want to do is change the offset. There are offset screw holes here. So this one is currently set to ATX, and then you've got EATX as well. What's interesting about this, I'm not sure if this will translate well on camera, but pressed into the metal, it says place controller here. It will allow you to install magnets on it, and all of NZXT controllers are magnetic, and they've got a perfect cutout for it here. That's quite nice. I do like that. It's got little cable pass-through holes for fans up the front too, just in case you don't have the RGB version with this fan frame included. So there's plenty of places to pass cables through. As I previously mentioned, it does have that classic NZXT cable management bar that'll hide everything. The cutouts on the bottom of the motherboard tray are massive, so basically anything that you want to plug in down there is going to fit quite easily. There's another small slit at the top of the motherboard tray. So if you're installing a radiator with heaps of fan cables, typically you would have to feed them in through holes like this, but because this has got a hole that is really narrow and close to the top of the case, you're not going to see any cables. However, for motherboard support, this one gets a bit interesting too. The H7 Flow RGB supports ITX up to EATX. This is just a regular ATX board, and when I remove the board, you'll notice that there is something that you're not going to see much of this year, and that is there's no back connector motherboard support. But I did speak to NZXT about this at Computex, and they weren't sure that it was going to catch on. So, you know, that's that. I mean, what else can I say? I don't really care if it has it or not, because to be honest, for me personally, all the motherboards that I'm still using are regular old motherboards without back connectors. And if there's a case that has back connector support, I will most likely use a back connector motherboard. I hope this is all making sense to you guys, but yeah, really not a big deal. For air cooler support, the maximum supported height here is 185 millimeters, so quite extensive air cooler support. For GPU support, the H7 Flow supports GPUs up to 410 millimeters long. This is a stonkingly large RTX 4080. This is the Gigabyte Aero card, probably the one we're using in this build. And you can also vertically mount it too if you have a supported vertical mount bracket, because the I/O cutouts on the back of the case, there's no horizontal support, so you can do vertical GPUs if you like. For case wiring, we've got a USB 3.2 Type A connector. We've got a front panel connector for all of the cables to be plugged in a single block. There's the front panel audio cable and a USB Type C cable as well. And it's got a little cap on it. We can pop that cap off and you can see what's going on. For case I/O, there's a power button with an integrated power light, 2 USB Type A ports, a USB Type C port, and a combined headphone and microphone jack. That's everything I think you need to know about this new NZXT H7 Flow RGB. As mentioned a little bit earlier, I think NZXT could have come up with a better name for this and not make it an H7 at all. Because to be honest with you, this shares almost no similarities with the H7 that this is supposed to be replacing. So yeah, strange move, but let's do a build and then I'll let you guys know what the deal is. And don't worry, it's good things, right? It's good. Let's take a look at the thermals of the NZXT H7 Flow. What you're seeing on your screen right now is the thermals are pretty darn good. But as I say with these builds, 7800X3D just doesn't get that hot. 360ml liquid cooler is a little bit overkill, but regardless, the thermals are good, and I would suspect that if you use hardware similar to this, you'll see very similar thermal performance. Yeah, NZXT's done a good job with this brand new H7. If you're interested in any of the parts, there's a PCPartPicker list down below in the description. You can check that out at your own leisure, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this new case because it's strange that they've called it the H7, because the only similarity this case shares with the original H7 is the fact that a motherboard goes in it, because basically everything else is completely different. Fine, the front radiator mounting and the top radiator mounting and fan mounting is the same, and the rear mounting is the same and all that. Sure, that's like almost all cases at the moment anyway. But what's different is that whole power supply shroud, the way that they've rotated the power supply so it sits in the back kind of like a dual chamber. I would call this a 1.5 chamber case. As well as that, all of the space underneath where the motherboard would typically go. You have to remember, this case is a lot taller than the original H7 as well because of the way they've rotated the power supply. I think this is a good thing because it opens up the case a little bit, creates better airflow, there's less restriction. The power supply can pull fresh air in from the back of the case. Usually it would pull it from underneath. Speaking of the underneath of the case, the design for the intake on the bottom is pretty darn cool. It's an air channel kind of in a curved V shape, I would say, or a U shape, and it draws air in and kind of funnels it into those fans and then drags it up, and chimney effect goes straight up. And the fact that the fan mounting is flush, I really, really like that. However, I suspect if you use fans that are thicker than 25mm, which is the typical thickness for these fans, it's going to protrude that sunken fan look. So just keep that in mind, especially if you're using some of these other fans. I think, like, let's say you have a Fantex T30 that is a 30mm thick fan. Yeah, you will see it protrude from the bottom. But other than that, I think you're going to be good with most fans. I like the sunken fan look. It looks cool because it just looks like it's part of the case itself. And in the case of this, it actually helps with the airflow quite a bit too. It directs the air into the GPU a little bit better. And as we saw with the thermals as well, the thermals with the case closed are better for the GPU because you're not pulling fresh air in from the side. You're directing the air in from the bottom and using that chimney effect to push the air directly into the GPU. So once again, very good stuff here. That said, I feel like the design and construction of the H7 is really, really nice. And like I said, this is just not the same case at all. In fact, I think this is a lot better than the original H7. With saying that, the cable management is really nice as well. Here's a quick clip of how I ended up doing the cable management in the build. Look, it's not the cleanest thing in the world, but as you can see, there's plenty of tie down points for everything, and I didn't have to add any extra Velcro, didn't have to use zip ties, I didn't have to do anything. Everything just has a place. As PCs get less complicated, but more complicated with fan wiring, especially with fans like these NZXT ones, it's nice to know that there's plenty of space for your cables to go without you having to fuss, and that the back panel can go on quite well. And to be honest with you, with this new H7, I really don't have anything bad to say about it. When I saw this at Computex, I was like, oh, they've called it an H7. And then when I looked closer, it wasn't really an H7 at all. And I feel that way again. However, now that I've got it here and I've had time to build with it and see what makes it tick, I think this is just one of their better cases they've released over the last couple of years. Sure, it doesn't have back connector support, but I don't care. And I'm sure most of you guys out there also don't care that it doesn't have back connector support. Guys, if you're interested in this new version of the NZXT H7 Flow, this one's going for $149 US with that fan frame in the front, and around 249 Aussie dollars for the same dealio in either black or white. I gotta say, like, this is a premium case. You pay a little bit more of a premium price, but the thing is, guys, with this case, you will like it. I really, really like it. It is crazy easy to build in, and the thermals are good, and that's the most important thing. I think you guys are gonna like it.